I never thought I would have to choose between the woman I loved and my self-respect. After 2 years with Jessica, I was ready to build a life together until her parents' lies turned everything upside down. When my grandfather passed, leaving me his house, her family showed their true colors. What started as subtle disapproval became an all-out war to destroy me. Before I tell you how I lost my fiancé but found myself, let me know where you are watching from today and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand your ground against toxic family members. I met Jessica at my college friend Tom's birthday party 3 years ago. The moment she walked in, I noticed her warm smile and the way she genuinely listened when people spoke. Unlike most of the party crowd, she wasn't there to get drunk or hook up. We bonded over our shared love of old bookstores and hiking trails that most tourists never discover. By the end of the night, I had her number and a strange certainty that something important had just begun. Our first date was at a small coffee shop where we ended up talking until the staff started stacking chairs around us. The connection was effortless, like finding a part of myself I never knew was missing. Jessica worked as a kindergarten teacher, putting her whole heart into helping kids learn and grow. Her patience and kindness were things I admired daily. I had a good job as a software engineer at a stable company, nothing flashy but enough to live comfortably. After dating for a year, we decided to move in together. We found a modest apartment halfway between our workplaces and filled it with second-hand furniture and plants that Jessica somehow kept alive despite my tendency to forget watering them. We talked about the future openly. Marriage, maybe kids down the road, a house with a yard someday. Nothing rushed, just a quiet confidence that we were building something real together, the kind of love that grows stronger with everyday moments. The way she remembered how I liked my coffee, how I knew to bring home her favorite ice cream when she had a rough day at work. It felt like we were writing our own definition of happiness. I first met Jessica's parents, the Harringtons, at an upscale restaurant downtown. Jessica had warned me they were particular about appearances, so I wore my best suit and even got a haircut. Mr. Harrington was a successful investment banker, and Mrs. Harrington ran a high-end interior design business. They arrived 15 minutes late, giving brief, stiff hugs to their daughter and measuring handshakes to me. Throughout dinner, they were technically polite but emotionally cold. Every question felt like an assessment I was failing. They asked about my family background, seeming disappointed when I mentioned growing up in a middle-class neighborhood. They perked up briefly when I mentioned my software engineering job, then deflated when they realized I wasn't at a prestigious tech giant or startup. Mrs. Harrington touched Jessica's arm at one point and said, "Andrew always said you would make a wonderful mother someday. The teacher experience must be good practice." When Jessica tensed beside me, I learned that Andrew was her ex-boyfriend from college, the son of one of Mr. Taine, Harrington's golf buddies, and currently working at a prestigious law firm. On the drive home, Jessica apologized for their behavior. "They just need time to warm up to you," she said, squeezing my hand. They were really invested in my relationship with Andrew and took it hard when we broke up. "Give them a chance to see how happy you make me." I wanted to believe her. I really did. After dating Jessica for 2 years, I knew she was the one I wanted to spend my life with. I saved for 6 months to buy an engagement ring, skipping lunches out and picking up extra freelance work on weekends. The ring wasn't enormous, but it was elegant and good quality, something I hoped would symbolize our love perfectly. I proposed at the botanical gardens during the spring bloom, arranging for a photographer to capture the moment when I got down on one knee beside her favorite flower display. Jessica cried happy tears, said yes immediately, and we spent the whole afternoon walking on air, making plans and calling friends. The celebration dinner with her parents that weekend brought us crashing back to earth. Mrs. Harrington examined the ring with pursed lips, turning it under the light. "This is..." She paused, searching for words, "dainty. Did you choose it together?" When Jessica proudly said I had selected it myself, Mr. Harrington cleared his throat. "You know, Ryan, marriage is a significant financial undertaking. Jessica has always been accustomed to a certain lifestyle. I hope your career prospects are solid." Jessica defended me, mentioning my recent promotion, but the damage was done. The evening continued with subtle digs about wedding costs and their apparent concerns about our compatibility. I tried to stay positive, reminding myself this was about Jessica and me, not her parents. As wedding planning began, the tension only increased. Mrs. Harrington insisted on being involved in every detail from venue selection to flower arrangements. What had started as occasional mentions of Andrew became a recurring theme. "Did you know Andrew's firm just made him partner?" Mrs. Harrington would say while reviewing catering options. "Or you remember how Andrew took Jessica to Paris? That hotel would have been perfect for a honeymoon." I tried to be understanding. Jessica was their only daughter, and they had certain expectations. But each comparison chipped away at my patience. After one particularly frustrating planning session where Mr. 2 Harrington questioned whether my vacation days would cover a reasonable honeymoon, Jessica and I had our first major argument about her parents. "You need to set some boundaries," I said, pacing our living room. "They constantly undermine me and compare me to Andrew." Jessica was defensive. "They don't mean anything by it. This is just how they show they care. By making me feel like I will never be good enough." "You are being too sensitive," she replied. "They're paying for most of the wedding. Of course they want input." She promised to talk to them, and I wanted to believe things would improve. I loved Jessica and was committed to our future together. Little did I know how much worse things would get. The real betrayal came during a family barbecue at Jessica's parents' house. Jessica had been tense all morning, but wouldn't tell me why. The moment we arrived, I understood. Standing by the grill with Mr. Mouse. Harrington was a tall, polished-looking man I had never met, but instantly recognized from descriptions. "Andrew." Jessica froze beside me, her hand tightening around mine. I had never seen her look so uncomfortable. Mrs. Harrington swept over, acting surprised. "Oh, Jessica, I forgot to mention Andrew dropped by. Such a happy coincidence." Throughout the afternoon, the Harringtons created situations pushing Jessica and Andrew together. Looking at old photo albums, reminiscing about shared vacations, even having them team up for yard games. I was consistently sidelined, introduced to distant relatives as just Jessica's friend, and excluded from conversations. During a moment alone getting drinks from the kitchen, I overheard Mrs. Harrington talking to Jessica on the patio. "Sweetheart, I really think you're making a mistake. Look at Andrew. He still cares for you. Has established, now ready to settle down. You two have history." The drive home was painfully silent. When we finally reached our apartment, Jessica broke down. "I am so sorry about today. I had no idea he would be there." "But you knew something was off this morning," I said quietly. "You were nervous before we arrived." She finally admitted the truth. "They never stopped hoping I would get back with Andrew. They think we're rushing into marriage. They think you're nice, but not." She hesitated, "Not what they pictured for me." "And what do you think?" I asked, hard in my throat. "I love you," she said. "But please try to understand how hard this is for me too. They're my family." I nodded, but something had shifted between us. A seed of doubt had been planted that would only grow in the months ahead. My grandfather was the most important person in my life growing up. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, he took me in without hesitation. He wasn't wealthy or particularly educated, just a retired carpenter who had built his own modest home and lived by a simple code of honesty and hard work. When I got the call that he had been hospitalized with heart problems, everything else took a back seat. I spent every evening after work at the hospital sitting beside his bed, telling him about my day, reminiscing about fishing trips and woodworking projects from my childhood. Jessica was supportive at first, bringing homemade soup to the hospital and sitting with us. But as days stretched into weeks, she became increasingly distant. She claimed stress from work and wedding planning were taking a toll, but I sensed something else bothering her. Despite the growing tension with Jessica and her family, I found comfort in the familiar routines of our home together. I would come back from the hospital exhausted, and even on nights when Jessica was already asleep, the simple fact that she was there gave me hope that we could work through our problems. My grandfather's condition worsened rapidly. The doctors said his heart was simply wearing out, and at 87 there were limited interventions they could offer. I was with him when he passed, holding his weathered hand as he took his final breaths. He died peacefully with a gentle smile that I will carry in my memory forever. The funeral was small but dignified, just as he would have wanted. My friends came to support me along with former colleagues of his from the Carpenters Union. Jessica attended but seemed uncomfortable throughout the service. Her parents, despite my explicit invitation, chose not to come. They sent an impersonal flower arrangement with a generic card. 3 days after the funeral, I met with my grandfather's lawyer for the reading of the will. I was surprised to learn that my grandfather had left me his house. It wasn't a mansion by any means, but it was in a desirable neighborhood that had appreciated significantly over the decades he had lived there. The lawyer estimated its value at nearly $700,000. I was overwhelmed. My grandfather had given me a foundation for the future, just as he had always done throughout my life. While the inheritance didn't change who I was, it did suddenly eliminate many of the financial anxieties about our upcoming wedding and future plans. When I told Jessica about the inheritance that evening, I noticed an immediate shift in her demeanor. The distant, preoccupied woman of recent weeks vanished, replaced by the warm, affectionate girlfriend I had fallen in love with. She hugged me tightly, saying how proud my grandfather must have been of me, how this was exactly what we needed for our fresh start. I wanted to believe her renewed enthusiasm was genuine. Maybe the stress of our wedding planning combined with my grandfather's illness had simply been too much. Maybe this inheritance represented hope for her too. The very next day, Jessica called to say her parents wanted to take us to dinner to celebrate my inheritance. The same people who couldn't be bothered to attend my grandfather's funeral now wanted to celebrate the property he had left me. It felt wrong, but Jessica was so excited about this apparent olive branch that I agreed. At dinner, the Harringtons were almost unrecognizable. Gone were the cold assessments and thinly veiled comparisons to Andrew. Instead, Mr. Harrington clapped me on the shoulder like an old friend. Mrs. Harrington asked thoughtful questions about my grandfather and seemed genuinely interested in my answers. "Your grandfather sounds like a wonderful man," Mrs. Harrington said, her voice dripping with newfound warmth. "Such solid values. Jessica has told us how much he meant to you." Mr. Harrington raised his glass in a toast. "To Ryan," he said. "A fine young man with a bright future ahead. We are pleased to welcome you to our family." The sudden change was jarring. For 2 years they had barely tolerated my existence. Now they were treating me like a long-lost son. I couldn't help but wonder what had changed besides the property now in my name. The answer came sooner than I expected. The following weekend, the Harringtons showed up at our apartment, unannounced. Jessica seemed nervous, but not surprised by their visit, making me suspect she had known they were coming. After awkward small talk about the weather and wedding plans, Mrs. Harrington reached out to touch my hand. "Ryan, dear," she said, "we have something to ask you." Over the next 30 minutes, they explained their situation. Due to some poor investments and market downturns, they were facing financial difficulties. They needed to downsize from their current home, but hadn't found anything suitable in their price range. The solution they proposed left me speechless. Since I now had my grandfather's house and would presumably be moving there with Jessica after the wedding, perhaps they could move in temporarily until they sorted out their finances. I glanced at Jessica, expecting her to be as surprised as I was. Instead, she nodded encouragingly. "It would just be for a little while," she said. 6 months, maybe a year at most." I needed time to think, I told them. The house was still filled with my grandfather's belongings. I hadn't even had time to process his death, let alone decide what to do with his property. Jessica walked her parents out, then returned with a frustrated expression. "Why didn't you just say yes?" she demanded. "They really need our help." "Our help," I echoed. "This is my grandfather's house we're talking about. Your parents have never shown me any kindness until now." "Daunt, you find the timing suspicious." She accused me of being paranoid and ungenerous. "They were trying to make amends," she insisted. This was my chance to improve my relationship with my future in-laws. I agreed to think about it, but something didn't add up. The Harringtons had always presented themselves as financially successful. Their sudden hardship immediately after my inheritance seemed too convenient. While Jessica was at work the next day, I did some research. Mr. Harrington's investment firm was doing fine according to recent press releases. Their house wasn't listed for sale. In fact, property records showed they had recently refinanced their mortgage, taking out a significant equity loan. Most disturbing of all, through some social media sleuthing, I discovered they had been in regular contact with Andrew. There were comments on private posts, check-ins at the same restaurants, even a photo of Andrew helping Mr. Harrington with what looked like renovation plans. When I confronted Jessica with what I had found, she became defensive. So what if they still talked to Andrew Hess, been family friends with them for years? And maybe they took out equity to invest in something new. You don't know their full financial situation. You lied to me, I said. You knew they were still close with Andrew. You knew about this plan to move into my grandfather's house. You don't trust me or my family, she shot back. Maybe my parents are right about you after all. The conversation ended with Jessica storming out to spend the night at a friend's place. I sat alone in our apartment wondering how we'd gone from planning a wedding to this fundamental breakdown in trust. The final blow came after 2 weeks of tense interactions, and Jessica sleeping in the spare room. I had been working late on a critical project, often coming home after midnight to find Jessica already asleep or pretending to be. One night I returned to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes red from crying. When I asked what was wrong, she looked at me with such contempt that I physically stepped back. "How could you?" she whispered. How could I? What, I was genuinely confused. "My mother saw you with her," Jessica spat, "at the Riverside Hotel. Don't deny it." I was stunned. I hadn't been to any hotel. I had been at the office every night, something my team could verify. When I said as much, Jessica laughed bitterly. "Right, working. That's why you shower as soon as you get home. That's why you've been so distant. Don't take me for a fool, Ryan." No matter what I said, Jessica wouldn't believe me. According to her, her mother had seen me entering the hotel with a blonde woman 2 nights earlier. There was no blonde woman. There was no hotel visit. But Jessica was convinced. That's when I realized what was happening. The Harringtons had never accepted me. When I unexpectedly inherited property they coveted, they changed tactics. Now that I was hesitant about letting them move in, they needed a new approach. What better way to break up our engagement than a cheating accusation? The next day, Jessica insisted we have dinner with her parents to clear the air. I agreed, but only because I wanted to confront them directly about their manipulation. We met at their house, the same place where they had ambushed me with Andrew months earlier. The evening began with strained politeness. Mrs. Harrington served an elaborate meal, while Mr. Harrington discussed the weather and sports as if nothing was wrong. Jessica sat rigid beside me, barely touching her food. After dessert, Mrs. Harrington placed a manila envelope on the table. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room," she said solemnly. "Jessica told us about your—" She paused, dramatically indiscretion. I maintained my composure as she pulled out printed photos that supposedly showed me entering the Riverside Hotel with an unidentifiable blonde woman. The images were grainy, taken from a distance, and showed a man with similar build and hair color, but certainly not me. I could tell immediately they had been edited poorly at that. "What do you have to say for yourself, Mr.?" Harrington demanded, his previous friendliness replaced by righteous indignation. "I would say this is a pathetic attempt at manipulation," I replied calmly. Their shocked expressions would have been comical in any other context. Jessica flinched beside me. "Ryan, Mr." Harrington said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "Perhaps it would be best for everyone if you just admit your mistake. These things happen. Jessica deserves someone who can be faithful, someone stable. Perhaps," he exchanged glances with his wife, "you could do the honorable thing and step aside." The suggestion hung in the air. Mrs. Harrington quickly added Jessica could move back home while she sorts things out. "We've actually run into Andrew recently. Hess been asking about her." In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This wasn't about me cheating. This was about removing me from the equation so Jessica would reunite with Andrew while her parents secured my grandfather's house in the process. The audacity was breathtaking. I looked at Jessica, searching her face for any sign that she recognized the manipulation. All I saw was confusion and hurt. "These photos are fake," I said firmly. "I was at work every night last week until after midnight. My entire team can verify that, as can the security logs at our office building. I spoke directly to Jessica now. Your parents are lying to you because they want us to break up. They want the house, and they want you back with Andrew. Mrs. Harrington gasped theatrically. How dare you accuse us? I turned to face them. I know about your refinanced mortgage. I know you don't have financial problems. I know you've been in regular contact with Andrew planning something behind our backs. Mr. Harrington turned an alarming shade of red. You had no right to investigate our personal affairs, and you had no right to falsely accuse me of cheating to manipulate your daughter. I shot back. I pulled out my phone and showed them what I had discovered. The property records. The social media interactions with Andrew. Even an email thread I had found where Mrs. Harrington had contacted a photo editing service which had taken considerable detective work on my part. Their denials became increasingly desperate. Jessica, meanwhile, had gone completely silent, her face unreadable. You need to choose, Jessica, I finally said. Either you see what they're doing and stand with me, or you're part of this manipulation. Jessica turned to me, anger flashing in her eyes. How can you make me choose between you and my family? After everything they have done for me, that's when I knew I had lost her. Despite the evidence, despite the obvious scheme, her loyalty remained with her parents. I stood up feeling strangely calm in the middle of this emotional hurricane. I won't be manipulated, gaslit, or falsely accused, I said. Not by any of you. I walked out, leaving the Harringtons in shocked silence, and Jessica calling my name. In the car, I finally let the emotions hit me. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak, all washed over me in waves. But beneath it all was a strange sense of relief. The truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. Jessica came home after midnight. I had spent the intervening hours packing a small bag, planning to stay at a hotel until I figured out next steps. When she walked in, her eyes were red and puffy from crying. How could you embarrass me like that? She demanded. My parents were just looking out for me, by lying, by manufacturing evidence, by trying to push you back to Andrew. That's not looking out for you, Jessica. That's controlling you. She collapsed onto the couch, suddenly looking exhausted. They need somewhere to stay, Ryan. Their financial advisor made some bad investments. Why can't you just help them? If you love me, Yad, do this. So, we had come to the ultimatum. I sat beside her, maintaining some distance. Your parents don't need my help, I said softly. They want to control both of us. They always have. They never approved of me because I wasn't Andrew, and now they're using my grandfather's house as leverage. You don't understand, she cried. If you don't let them move in, calling off the wedding. The words hung between us, heavy with finality. I had imagined many versions of our future together, but none like this. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of clarity. You don't need to call it off, I said. I'm doing that myself. Her expression shifted from anger to shock. What am calling off our wedding, Jessica? I love you, but I won't marry someone who allows her parents to manipulate and control our lives. I won't be falsely accused of cheating. I won't have my dead grandfather's legacy used as a pawn in their games. You're choosing a house over me, she whispered incredulously. No, I'm choosing self-respect and truth over manipulation and lies. I'm choosing not to start a marriage based on distrust and control. She began crying again, this time with a desperation that tugged at my heart. But through the pain, I knew I was making the right choice. I gently placed the engagement ring on the coffee table between us. I think you should stay with your parents for a while, I said. Take some time to think about what kind of life you really want and whether their approval is worth sacrificing your own happiness. The next morning, Jessica packed several suitcases while I kept my distance. Her parents arrived to help her move out, avoiding eye contact with me. As Jessica walked out the door, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this, she said. When you're all alone in that big empty house, you'll wish you had compromised. I might be alone, I replied, but I'll be at peace with myself. I hope you find that too someday. After they left, I sat in the silent apartment, feeling both broken and somehow freed. The future I had planned was gone, but in its place lay endless new possibilities, all of them built on my own terms. 3 days later, the Harringtons returned while Jessica was at work. Mr. Harrington tried intimidation, claiming Jessica had told him I had verbally promised them the house. Mrs. Harrington attempted emotional manipulation, crying about their supposed financial troubles. I showed them the security camera I had installed after our confrontation, which was recording our conversation. I also revealed I had recorded our previous dinner on my phone, capturing their entire scheme. "You can leave willingly now," I said calmly, "or I can share these recordings with Jessica and everyone else you know. Your choice." They left hurling threats about lawyers and ruining my reputation. But we both knew they had no case, legally or morally. It was the last time I saw them in person, though not the last I would hear about them. The next few weeks were the hardest. Canceling wedding arrangements, explaining the situation to confused friends and family, moving my things to my grandfather's house, which still held all his belongings, memories, and the lingering scent of his favorite pipe tobacco. I questioned my decision constantly. Had I been too harsh, too unwilling to compromise? Should I have tried harder to make Jessica see the truth? Each empty evening brought fresh doubts and the temptation to call her to try again. My friends became my lifeline. Tom, the friend whose birthday party had introduced me to Jessica, came over regularly with takeout and distraction. My coworkers covered for me on days when the grief was too overwhelming to function. Slowly, I began sorting through my grandfather's possessions, finding comfort in connecting with his memory. 1 month after the breakup, I received an unexpected message from Andrew of all people. He asked to meet for coffee, a request so surprising that curiosity outweighed my initial impulse to refuse. We met at a neutral location downtown. Andrew was much as I had imagined from the Harringtons' descriptions, polished and conventionally successful. But he also seemed genuinely uncomfortable fidgeting with his coffee cup as we exchanged awkward greetings. "I owe you an apology," he began. "I had no idea what Janet and Bill were planning." He explained that the Harringtons had been pressuring him to reconnect with Jessica for months. They had told him our relationship was failing, that Jessica was unhappy but too loyal to leave. They had invited him to family gatherings, orchestrated accidental meetups, and consistently undermined my character in their conversations. "I never wanted to get in the middle of your relationship," he insisted. "Jessica and I broke up years ago for good reasons. We're different people now." When he heard about the cheating accusations from a mutual friend, he realized how far the Harringtons were willing to go. He had no romantic interest in Jessica anymore and was actually engaged to someone else, a detail the Harringtons had conveniently omitted from their narratives. "They used both of us," he concluded. "I thought you should know." His disclosure provided the final piece of the puzzle and an unexpected sense of closure. The Harringtons' manipulation extended beyond just Jessica and me. They had created an elaborate fiction, serving their own desires, disregarding the feelings and autonomy of everyone involved, including Andrew. After our meeting, I focused on rebuilding. I renovated parts of my grandfather's house, preserving the elements that reminded me of him while making the space my own. I reconnected with old hobbies, joined a local hiking group, and even started volunteering at the community center where my grandfather had taught woodworking classes to kids. Work became a positive outlet rather than just a means to pay bills. I threw myself into new projects, earning recognition and eventually a promotion. The colleagues who had supported me through the breakup became close friends, expanding my social circle beyond what it had been during my relationship with Jessica. 6 months after our breakup, I ran into Jessica at a local farmer's market. She looked different, her hair shorter, her expression more guarded. We exchanged cautious hellos, then stood in awkward silence among the vegetable stands. "You look good," she finally said. "How's the house? It's coming along," I replied. "How are you?" She told me she had moved to her own apartment across town. She wasn't with Andrew, as I had occasionally wondered. In fact, she had taken a teaching position at a school in another state and would be moving at the end of the month. "I never got to say I'm sorry," she said quietly. "My parents, they really made me believe you were cheating. By the time I figured out the truth, it felt too late." I nodded, surprised by how peaceful I felt. The anger and hurt that had consumed me for months had faded to a dull ache. "I hope you're finding your own path," I told her sincerely. "You're a wonderful teacher in person, Jessica." You deserve to live your life on your terms. We parted with genuine wishes for each other's happiness. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no promises to stay in touch. Just two people acknowledging the end of a chapter and the beginning of separate journeys. That encounter marked a turning point in my healing. I realized I had spent so much time trying to be acceptable to Jessica's parents that I had partially lost sight of my own values and worth. My grandfather had raised me to be honest, hardworking, and true to myself. Those principles had guided me through the darkest days after the breakup, and they would guide me forward. The house that had been the catalyst for so much conflict became a sanctuary. I finished renovations and made it truly mine, while honoring my grandfather's legacy through small touches, his handmade furniture, the workshop in the garage where he had taught me to build things with my own hands, the garden he had tended now flourishing under my care. Sometimes love requires sacrifice, but it should never require sacrificing your self-respect. Standing up for myself cost me a relationship, but it preserved something more valuable, my integrity and sense of self-worth. That was my grandfather's greatest gift to me. Not the house, but the example of living with principle and dignity. As I reflect on everything that happened, I realize that losing what I thought I wanted led me to gain what I truly needed. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that set us free. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice that ultimately led to unexpected growth? Leave your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more life experiences. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember, the foundation of any relationship should be mutual respect and honesty. Take care of yourselves and each other.